Hello, and welcome to this tutorial covering common administration tasks when using Oracle Utilities Enterprise SaaS and other Oracle Cloud services such as object storage. This tutorial is broken into a few parts. First, we'll cover some common bookmarks that you should be using or setting up in order to properly get to the administrative areas of the services. And there are really three of them that we're going to cover here today. The first two, Oracle Identity Cloud and the user management screens, are for managing the identity and roles for the folks accessing the enterprise SaaS service itself, whether it be customer cloud service, meter solution cloud service, or work and asset cloud service. You can do many of the same things in either area, and they are synchronized together. But the full feature settings and administration you'll find in IDCS. And then the object storage, which is part of Oracle's cloud infrastructure and platform services, is really a whole separate identity management system that's in play. The concepts are very similar, but for most users, those will be separate user records, separate logins, and the way you manage access to object storage is somewhat different from how you do grant access to the other roles. So first, let's talk about the three screens. As I mentioned, two of them are for enterprise SaaS administration, that's user management and IDCS, and then a separate identity system for object storage. So let's check and verify how the bookmarks are set for each of those. Your starting point is typically the Oracle Cloud account. That's the first thing you get access to. So once you're there, from the hamburger menu in the top left corner, you will be able to find a user's menu option with identity under that. And if you click that, you will get to what we call the user management screens. And so once you get there, you want to save that as a bookmark for user management. Then once you've got that bookmarked, you can hit the button for the identity console, which will take you to the full IDCS dashboard. IDCS is acronym for Identity Cloud Service. And you can see Identity Cloud Service right on the top when you're at that dashboard. Looks like something like this. So save a bookmark to IDCS dashboard. And then a third bookmark that will be handy is for your object storage. When you're in the cloud account, from the compute tile, you can get over to the service console and pick object storage, and you'll get a view that looks something like this with your compartments and buckets access. Have that bookmarked, and then you'll be able to manage identity for that area in an efficient manner. Okay, so you've got bookmarks to the three management areas. Now we'll look at a set of use cases for each of those, how you use those screens that are available to you to do common tasks around both granting new users access and checking what access, troubleshooting if current users don't seem to have access to something that they think they should or you think they should. So I've got a live demo going, and this is Identity Cloud Service view. We'll go back here, and we'll start out with our user use cases for IDCS. We've got 4 of them here, plus 1 overall at the end. So the first one is creating a new user and assigning access to appropriate groups. So we go through the users menu to start that activity. You can either hit this icon for users, or there's this dashboard or hamburger menu that gives you access to users, groups, and applications. So we'll use that frequently. If we go to users and close that menu, we get a list like this of existing users. I'm going to, for the scenario that we're interested in, for the add, it's a 2-step process. first get add user details. So we'll just fill in our required fields here. And hit next. In the step 2, assign user to groups. So this is very handy. It just gives you a list of groups that are available, and you could select one or more of them and say that this new user should be a member of, in this case, a CSR group. You would hit finish, and that user would be created and now in your list. I'm not going to do that on this case, so I'm going to just close this down. But your new user would appear, John Smith would appear in this list. If we need, for some reason, to reset a password for an existing user, how would you do that? Well, in IDCS, if you're already on the users list, you can just drill into an existing user. You'll notice that there's a reset password option on this screen, and you can hit that. That'll trigger email out to the recovery email for them to reset to a new permanent password. Okay. How might I check or maintain the users that are in a group? Right. Well, in that case, we're probably going to go through groups. And for instance, we're interested in the CSR group and what users are in that group. So I just kind of navigate to the group I'm interested in, see what users are there. If I need to add someone, I can do that right from the assign button and find the user I'm interested in and add them to the group if I need to. I'm going to cancel that. Okay, and then check or maintain all access to an application role. So here we're going to access the applications menu item. Remember that each environment that you have in Enterprise SaaS is a separate application. And for instance, if we're interested in the prod application, we can then switch over to the application roles view, and we'll get a listing like this that shows all groups assigned to each role that's available. And separately, if any users are directly assigned to one of these roles, you'll also see this view. If you click on the link, you can get a listing of which groups are linked. That's easy enough. If you do have a direct user assignment, in which case we do on app user, this is quite a handy view because it gives you both the indirect members who are tied to this role through group membership, as well as the one direct access, which happens to be the process automation user. And so you get the full list of all the different users who are attached to app user role. If you need to do maintenance on who's attached to that app role, through the menu, you can do all the actions of assigning or revoking users or assigning and revoking groups. Okay. So that is use case 4. The separate item down here is about overall IDCS policies and settings. And you can access that via the settings menu in IDCS. So for instance, password policy is one of them. You can change your password policy, length, expiration, and so forth. Notifications is another one where it's setting up what events send emails out and what those emails, what the text on them says, and so forth. There's full documentation from IDCS about all these options. We won't go into it here because this is fairly not something you'll be doing every day. Not a common task. All right, and that finishes off the IDCS use case list. Now we'll move over to what you can do from user management screens, which overlaps in a lot of ways, but some of the views are slightly different, and you may, in some cases, find them more or less useful depending on what you need to do. But it's good to know your options. So the user management screen looks something like this. It just has, rather than using a hamburger menu up here, basically you just use these menus to look at your users and groups and drill into things. So if on our first use case is about creating a new user and assigning to groups, just like our use case was for IDCS, you can do it from user management. So if you're on the users list, you can hit the add button. It initially looks fairly similar in that there's a two-step process. First for the user details, and you would fill them out in a similar way with your required fields. And then once you've got those, you can hit the next button and go to part 2. This is a service access screen, which is a little different. It's not group membership. This is actually giving you the capability to assign direct role access to the user that you're adding. And that could involve administrative roles up here on top, or roles against the individual environments. So if you click on here, you get a list of the various roles that are available for each environment. As mentioned in other contexts, we think probably the easier way to maintain your access is not through giving direct access in this way, rather adding the user to giving them group membership and managing the group roles. So rather than setting anything here, we would just say finish, and that would add the user. I'm going to pretend to finish and just go back to my user list. And then if let's say I had just added Linda Elmer, for example, you'd find a record, something like this, and you could see what roles they have. If we look at Linda right now, she actually doesn't have any roles attached because she has no group membership and we gave her no roles. But if we go back and switch to a group view, and let's say we want to add Linda, the new user, to the CSR group, what we can do is drill into the group, switch to the user's view of that group, and say we want to add to the group. We find Linda in this list. Here she is, and we say add. And that adds Linda to the group CSR. If we now can drill over to Linda and look at her roles, we'll actually see that okay, just took a second to update. We can see that now under the dev environment, she has 2 roles, and that is because of her group membership. Notice that we don't have the ability to change those roles here. We can't delete them. And that's because it's through the group membership. If we want to take these roles away, we'd have to take her out of the group. And we can do that easy enough by, again, going back to CSR group. How would you remove Linda from this group? In user management, you can do that by hitting the menu on Linda and saying remove from group. Okay, and that will take away any rights that she might have had through the CSR user group. So we just actually covered essentially our use case 2 about checking or maintaining a user's access. When you find the user, you can check the roles and see what linkage they have and understand whether it's from a group or it's direct. If you want to see what a group has access to, very similar. We can just look at the CSR group and change to the roles view. That shows us that currently CSR group gives these 2 roles, app user and BI consumer, and that's exactly what was given to Linda when she joined the group. We could also maintain and add more roles. If we wanted to change CSR to have testing developer role, we would just select it, add it, and it would get added onto that group. And everyone who's already in that group would then have new access to the testing developer role in UTA. Okay, so that's how you see a group's access. And in fact, we've already also covered how to see what users are in a group. You just find the group and then check users. Okay, so that finishes off the main things you can do from user management. Now we're going to switch gears over to object storage and review how identity is managed for object storage for the folks who need to be able to either upload or download files that are being processed by the enterprise SaaS service. You had previously set up a linkage to your object storage, a bookmark for object storage. If you go to that screen where you can, the default view would be of your buckets and compartments and so forth, and you go to your hamburger menu and all the way to the bottom, you'll find an identity menu option with selections that help you manage the access and identity portion of object storage. So let's look in here. I have my bookmark to an object storage location. If I go to my hamburger menu, scroll down under identity, I can find users, groups, and policies, which are main ones we'll be looking at in this tutorial. So I selected users. Once you get into identity, you can kind of easily navigate through on this side of this is essentially menus. It gives us a user listing. As you should remember, there are users of object storage that are application users. This is how the application reads and writes from object storage. But then we also need essentially people who are able to also move files up and down, especially during implementation. And those users will look something like these two at the bottom, one for myself and one for Eyal. And you have the capability to drill into one of those users if they've already been created. Not much there, actually. The main information is right up top. So that's users. And how you create a new one. So if you have a new technical person joining who needs to be able to get access to the files, you would go through a create user step. That brings up a pop-up. You would create their username. This doesn't have to be an email address. It can just be, it is a login name that they'll be using. You will need their email address. So this could be, again, johnsmithutility.com. And you would hit create. And it's saying it wants a description. Okay, that's fine. Add that. Actually, I'll make this a bit better. John Smith, OCI. Okay, and I'll hit create. Okay, and now if we look at our list, we have John Smith, OCI in our user list, and we can drill into them. That's how you create a user. Now note that this user currently, at this stage, does not have any rights at all. Okay, so let's go back now and think about our common administration tasks with object storage. We just talked already about the first one, about creating a new user. The thing to remember about object storage users is that the only way they get access to the compartments and buckets is via group membership. Okay, so if the user is not in any groups, they really don't have much rights at all. They might be able to log in, but they won't be able to see anything. So we really need to review how you check and maintain a user's group membership. We'll come back and look at password in a moment. So we've got our user, John Smith, and now we have to determine what access are they going to get. If we go back to identity, now let's switch to groups. Okay, so if we want to attach a new user to a group, we have to go find it's kind of similar process. We have to find the group that we want to add them to and link them to that group. In this case, we, by default, set up 4 different groups, that 2 of them for application access, prod and non-prod, and then 2 for our human users, prod and non-prod. So let's say John Smith needs access to the non-prod compartments in object storage. That means that we need to add him to this group. There's already a few users in this group. If I say add user to group, once I drill into that, I can pick John Smith and say add John Smith to that group, okay? And now John Smith will have access to certain compartments that are attached to non-prod access. We could also add him to prod access as well if we needed to, right? Just another group membership. Currently, only my record is attached to the prod access, prod compartment access, okay? Going back to our earlier use case about resetting a password for a user, if you need to do that, you would just go, you might have seen it, you would just go to John Smith, top of his view, the first button here, create reset password. That's how you do it. That would send out an email again to the email on this user, okay? And then let's look once more. So the next question might be, well, what is the group's access? Okay, so unlike in the enterprise SaaS world where it's defined by linkage to application roles, in the object storage world, it's defined via what they call policies. So if we look at policies, we'll figure out how the group membership actually gives rights to users in that group. So we go back to our identity starting point and we look at policies. There are 4 policies that we create that match up one-to-one with the groups that we create. So essentially we created a set of policies for each group and gave it the exact same name. So if we're interested in our scenario here in the user non-prod access, what rights those actually are, we have to drill into this policy. Notice how it says for each of these that they have, each of them happens to have 4 statements. So we can see the statements if we drill in to the policy itself. There are 4 statements here. These are basically readable. They essentially just link a group. In this case, it's a group of the same name, the user non-prod access, with some rights. As you see here, to either manage buckets or manage objects. And then it's a linkage to which compartment is involved. And so there's 2 compartments that we've linked here. One is the shared compartment, and then this is the non-prod compartment. So membership in this group gives you essentially the ability to move files, but also manage buckets. So you could create a new bucket. If you're a human user, you can create a new bucket in these 2 compartments underneath them. Okay, and that basically sums up how to review what the rights are. If you did need to create a new policy, that's totally possible. You would probably need to look over some documentation on how the policy statements need to be written. As you can see, the compartment references to an OCID. Essentially everything in OCI has an OCID that you can reference. That's a unique key. Okay, so I believe that concludes the use cases for managing identity and access in object storage. So with that, I will thank you for watching this tutorial and for using Enterprise SaaS from Oracle Utilities.